Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay, and welcome to the Shadowlands Alpha. First impressions, first pass coverage here. Next up is the Frost Death Knight, which is kind of like the Identity Crisis spec in a way. It has a lot of flavor. It definitely has a lot of lore tied to it. Even continuing the argument right now because you can two-hand again, but we'll get more into that in enough time due to the fact of I don't know. It's a very frustrating point right now to bring up, even though the overall class has seen some tweaks. The amount of tweaks on the Frost Death Knights specifically seem to be the fewest ones, either because Blizzard doesn't know what they want to do with Frost, or they think it is one of these specs that works, which rogues work, and rogues all saw a number of tweaks. So we'll see how this keeps moving forward into the alpha. I'm not expecting many class or a spec adjustments for the next couple of months, maybe, until they get everything like feature in the game. Then they'll start doing the polish things. But overall, so today, this video is brought to you by my Design by Humans shop, which I've talked about a few other times, of course. But if you notice here, I am wearing the Little Lich King and Sindy shirt. This is made by Fabelina, across with a bunch of other designs. The link is down below. Themed, of course, for today. But if you would like to support what I do here online in a more physical sense, then check the link in the description box down below. And if you pick up any merch, any apparel, send me a tweet. Let me see you wearing that merch, or just a picture of the actual shirt, whichever works for you. But the artists that I work with love to see it showing up on social media too. So let me know if you get any. But let's look through here. And there's only one talent change. There's some adjustments here. One talent change. And that is just the new hypothermic presence, which replaces your big Frostworm dragon. Frostworm's Fury is baseline, which I know many of the Frost Death Knights were waiting for. And there it is, as it flies off literally into the terrain. But the new baseline talent, to get this out of the way, is called Hyperthermic Presence, where you embrace the ice in your veins, reducing the runic power cost of your abilities by 35% for 8 seconds. And it does not trigger the GCD. So, Breath of Sindragosa? You guessed it. Pretty much. Anyway, but it's 45-second cooldown. It lines up with every breath window. You delay it for every breath window. I kind of feel that it's when you start getting low on runic power, you use it to buffer yourself, to build back, to, counteract the runic power drain. Currently, of course, Breath of Sindragosa sits at 16 runic power per second. And when you pop Hyperthermic Presence, it drops it to 10. And that means that if you're at least casting at a 1 second GCD, requiring 50% haste, you can overcome the drain for those moments to actually sort of neutralize it out. But we'll see if that becomes a thing. I did the entire dungeon run just a little while ago as the build you saw a moment ago with Gathering Storm instead of Hyperthermic, just to see like what felt different without any Azerite, because there's a lot of things that prop up what Frost is, and it's sort of the big back end discussion we had today was that Frost Death Knight feels like it has the Identity Crisis, because a lot of what it gains is borrowed power. Instead of things being core, which I just showed that, Frostworm's Fury is now back, but that was borrowed power, but now it's baseline power. And the spec works if you obviously have played Frost before. Like, you walk up to things in the open world or anywhere else, or you start DPSing, and the rotation, it lends itself. You just kind of You smack things, you proc your obliterates and your rhymes, and stuff falls over, right? There's really not a lot of need to feel out how the spec works. However, part of that reason comes down to having to say spec Frost Scythe, for example, or having to obviously pick Breath of Sindragosa, which is the only maybe engaging talent on your 50 row. Ice Cap works right now on live because of Azerite, which is borrowed power, which is leaving. And, things like Inexorable Assault still exist, which is like what? You know? And Horn of Winter still on the GCD, things like that, which just Pillar of Frost still on the GCD, and ERW. So I was trying to think of the damn ERW still exists, which only really feeds into breath. So it's those kind of discussions that come up with the Frost DK that sort of not muddy the waters, but make things a little bit strange in how the spec is supposed to feel or how it's supposed to play, because it definitely works. I had a fun time doing the dungeon, and if you want to see, of course, the entire testing VOD or the dungeon run with all the commentary from my community helping me test, and Wordup Senpai was also there riffing on things. Apparently he made puns and it made the stream 80% more enjoyable. I don't know what those are, but it's fine. Like, the damage overall the course of the dungeon with not running breath was like all 3 of the DPS were pretty much even. Wordup got scumbagged on the last boss because in the Necrotic Wake right now, there's a bug where you can't, it sends the same person down the same lane, so you can't leave the lane and come back up to fight the Lich. So that's obviously not ideal. But the damage looked fine. Everything else felt fine. Well, let's go over the baseline stuff here, shall we? You have already seen that I just raised dead a while ago there. You do have your ghoul back now. All that means for Frost is a slight DPS additional cooldown, but that means another ability to pay attention to and track potentially. Sacrificial Pact comes in here, level 54, where you get to blow your ghoul up every 2 minutes. This is, so your ghoul was off the GCD, Sacrificial Pact is on. So this means that you can macro them together just to pop it and blow it up and heal yourself for 25% of your max health. It's an 8 target cap, which, get ready for target caps because we're going to get talking about that here in a little bit. But that is just sort of the extra flavor coming back in. Also, Death and Decay is back for the Frost Death Knight. But that is mostly because the tooltip says you can Scourge Strike and it hits all enemies near the target. It's because of the Covenant abilities that replace Death and Decay, and obviously every Death Knight would need Death and Decay to be able to be replaced. So if you ever cast it, I made fun of it in the dungeon run, that like you can cast it and it does some damage, but it's not going to do really anything. I mean, Ticks of Frost Fever will do more damage than this. So the one rune you cast your D&D with is just kind of Lichborn. I talked about this quite a bit in the previous video, and obviously put it into some context with the Blood DK as well. But this is a 2-minute cooldown where you draw upon your unholy energy, become undead for 10 seconds. Currently, it's very bugged. It counts as a shapeshift form for some reason, which doesn't make any sense. You can't mount and do things that require you to not be shapeshifted. But for 10 seconds, you'll increase your leech by 10% and making you immune to all charm, fear, and sleep. You can use it reactively if you're stunned, and you can pop IBF to break the stun and then be immune to stuns for the duration of IBF. Lichborn is the same way. If you are charmed, feared, or slept, you can pop Lichborn to break those and become immune to them. If you are Lichborn, you can then heal yourself with Death Coil, which is also returning. This is actually pretty awesome. I did some, obviously the dungeon is not going to just kill you right outright. I took a whole bunch of damage in the dungeon, then I had Runic Power and I double Death Coiled myself, and I was like, oh, okay, sure, that feels fine. The other change is that, of course, is that it is a ranged Runic Power spender. So if you cannot always hit your target with Frost Strike, which does more damage, you can at least throw Death Coils. So some flavory utility there, which is not going to be a ton, but the ability to actually be able to go, you know, where is the range? Blah. It is there. The other big one, of course, is this old macro that's existed for a very long time, where you can cast Lichborn and on the same global, because it's off the GCD is casting Lichborn, also heal yourself with Death Coil. So like it's essentially a health stone. It's a 40 Runic Power health stone, but a health stone nonetheless. But the big thing about Lichborn is the 10% leech, and also Pillar of Frost still being a core mechanic. It's actually buffed right now. It's 20% strength with the additional 1 rune equals 1% more for that 15-second duration. It's 10%, and then there's a leveling trait that levels it up later on, or a leveling passive that gives it to 20%. But you can level up a huge amount of strength And then you gotta heal yourself, pop Lichborn, and throw your dragon. And you're going to leech for 10% of all that damage that Sindragosa does. So at a little bit extra self-sustain and survivability. The other thing about Lichborn too is that if you are in Lichborn, things like Wake of Ashes that stuns undead will stun you. So you can pop AMS before you go into Lichborn to not be stunned, like a PvP situation or something like that. Additionally, this means that you cannot be feared, as it says you cannot be feared, so Turn Evil will not actually fear you. But we haven't really been able to test like the sleep interactions there. But it should work the same. We tested charms and fears in PvP and whatnot, but sometimes there's PvE interactions that may or may not be worth it. But between IBF is still a weird long cooldown for a very short duration. And then of course you still have AMS, which you have the weaker AMS, but then Frost has things, you know, like Permafrost, or you can take Death Pact, which is the only option that you really have for extra survivability. So at least Lichborn gives you something else to either Death Coil yourself or to Leech Heal and do a whole bunch of extra healing. There's also, if you're AoEing a whole bunch of mobs and you've got Breath of Sindragosa going and you come out of the breath window and you need to get healed and you have Frost Sights up or something like that, or vice versa, 10% leech while you're just blasting breath damage would obviously probably top you up pretty okay. Additionally, we talked about the dual wield and two-hand nature of Frost. It does work. It can happen. But here is probably the biggest part of this whole discussion is that two-hand for Frost means obviously one rune forge. And there are new rune forges. It also means there is some weird math behind the scenes on how Killing Machine works, which is your proc to give your auto attack crits, giving you the obliterate crits. The damage of those obliterates between two-hand and dual-wield is very, very similar. It's almost identical in the math in the back end, so it's not going to be a thing. You're not going to put on a two-hander and have like big obliterate crits in PvP. It's the same as dual-wielding. The problem is Killing Machine. I was told, let me pull up my notes here real quick to read some things off right now. This is via Tuesday, and a couple other DKs that were helping in chat as well earlier today to help me understand the back-end math as well. So shout out to DeGrain as well. Faradin actually poked me about the blood DK stuff as well. But to make Killing Machine work without the RPPM of the back end of Killing Machine, you would need a roughly 37% or higher critical hit chance with your two-hander to break even with auto attack swings per minute. Otherwise, dual-wielding is just better. Dual-wielding obviously happens faster. You do have the like 19% miss rate or whatever, but your two-hander obviously swings way slower. And of course, you can only have one rune forge. The new rune forge is a Rune of Hysteria, where you gain 20% runic, or 20%. You gain 20 runic power, and that stacks both times. You can have 40 more. And then you have a chance, it's like 3 times haste RPPM, to have a 20% buff to runic power generation for 8 seconds. If this procs again, it just cannibalizes itself and just refreshes. It doesn't extend. But obviously you have Razor Eyes to contend for, which is a huge part of your damage output as Frost, even on mostly on single target, right? That 15% more damage. Sanguination is for blood. I went over that in the blood video, as well as spell warding. Apocalypse is definitely going to be more for the Unholy DK, which may or may not be a thing they even use right now because it only works on their main ghoul. It could be a thing even Frost uses because you have a ghoul, but I doubt it. This brings up the weird thing of weapon twisting, which I cannot imagine will be a thing, and hopefully not. But there's some feedback right now going around where you'd have multiple weapons in your bags and you would switch weapons based on what you're doing at the moment. If you're in breath window, you have dual-wielding double hysteria weapons. And then if you're out of the breath window, you go back to Fallen Crusader and Razor Ice. Fallen Crusader is still really strong. 15% strength for 15. 6% heal when it procs. Unending Thirst is a new, maybe PvP, but not really, but like an open world extra survivability Rune Forge, maybe for leveling. It's 10% haste and movement speed when you kill a enemy that wields experience or honor, but then you also get a 5% max health heal when you kill them as well, and you move faster when you die. Sure, that's fine. It's an extra little flavorful one. This is not going to be seen in raids. You need to actually get the killing blow. But that's the biggest trade-off and argument between dual wielding and two-hand. Also, pole arms don't work for the Frost DK right now. You can't use any of your abilities, but that's just a bug. And having, you know, your Razor Ice main hand, because it has the auto attack damage. You don't want it to, I mean, it doesn't really matter too much, honestly, but they both have a 19% chance to miss, so whatever works. But Razor Ice and Fallen Crusader, or Razor Ice Hysteria, building up and having a little bit extra wiggle room for your runic power, because you do cap runic power, as Frost does sometimes, is a really good thing to have. Speaking of runic power, of course, you get Empowered Rune Weapon rank 2, which lowers the cooldown by 15 seconds at level 56. Your guess is as good as mine. Your cooldown's already awkwardly desync in weird ways anyway, so what the heck's this gonna do? Killing Machine rank 2 will make your Obliterates also deal frost damage, and rank 2 Obliterate deals 20% more damage. And yes, that means your Obliterates will scale 100% with your Mastery. And because you can force them to crit with Killing Machine, force, you know, whatever, it happens, RPPM, essentially, auto attack crits, it's big damage. Right now, at least currently in the numbers, it looks like Frost Strike is very much more a lot of your damage. A lot of Howling Blast, a lot of Frost Fever damage, a lot of Frost Strike damage, because it ignores armor, and Obliterate hits armor, right? So like just even Obliterates right now, the bottom of the combat log here, I mean, you're looking at, that was a double crit right there because of the proc, but even then, just a Frost Strike is almost as much damage, 3, 4, 5-ish, 100 damage, and the Obliterate is 460 plus 229, so not a huge difference there. But if the Obliterate crit with Killing Machine and did frost damage, which ignored armor, so it's like 30 more percent damage, and stack with Razor Ice and stack with your Mastery, there's a lot going on there with that one. That's gonna be pretty huge. So like there's the potential there for like, ooh, juicy, but at the same time, Sindragosa exists, right? And it kind of forces the build into a certain direction. And I'm not doing, you know, Covenant testing right now. The whole Crimson Mist or whatever, the Venthyr ability right now looks ridiculous. There's tales of 60 plus to 70 second breaths of Sindragosa right now. Sure, right? It's gonna happen. The DK community is gonna figure that all stuff out. But that is the back and forth on two-hand versus dual-wield, because your two-hander never misses, but dual-wield have the miss rate, but two-hander attacks slower, so you need enough crit rate, so your auto attacks work with the RPPM back end of Killing Machine, or you fall behind and you lose Obliterate damage, which of course, if you lose Obliterate damage, you're going to be just falling behind even more, even if it's, and especially when you want to get this to go, I don't know. Two-hand Frost seems like a, here it is, but right now anyway. I said Frostborn Fury is still baseline. I was told that each section of Sindragosa's breath, I guess there's basically like, see the circles in the breath, each chunky circle, how the game renders each one, has a 20 target cap for whatever that's worth. Sure, I guess. And now let's talk about target caps. So Breath of Sindragosa, everyone's favorite talent, which may or may not, depending on what camp you are in the Frost DK community, made the spec or ruined the spec. This changed to the new square root math scaling for diminishing returns, which means right now, up until 12 targets with the current math, you will do more damage with this version of Breath than you will with the current version. So right now in BFA, it's 100% damage to your main target and then 30% to all off targets. Now it's 100% main and then 1 divided by the square root of the number of targets, which works out to be basically at 2 targets, you're at 100% main target and 72% damage for your secondary target. And then each secondary target will keep going down by the square root of the number of targets. But until you get to 12 targets, that's not until you fall below the 30%, which you have right now, which is scary. But maybe Blizzard's just like, you know what? Fine. Just Breath Sindragosa, okay? Which is sad because I actually had fun playing Obliteration today. And especially Obliteration's gonna fly up in power when you're forced, right? Not you're forced, but when your rotational obliterates are always going to crit and scale with mastery. So if you're already going like a crit mastery crit build, you rock things like Gathering Storm, Obliteration, Icy Talons, and Runic, or Icy Talons and Murderous Efficiency. And then you run things like, I don't know, you just run an Avalanche, I guess. Sure, why not? Then you just become this machine gun obliteration cannon, essentially. And all your obliterates now are going to be huge. Your frost strikes will, because you're going to stack crit, your frost strikes will go up. You'll proc more killing machines outside of the window. And then when you're in the obliteration window, then you just rotate between, you know, the frost strike obliterate or the howling blast obliterate too. On that note as well, Frost Fever RP generation has also changed to the square root math potentially, because it was changed in 8.2 in BFA, but it's not lining up with the same information that I'm told. So something has changed there as well. The long and short of it is that actually the more targets you actually do Frost Fever, the more AoE, the more runic power you will generate. It just says on the tooltip, right? It just says that has a chance. Frost Fever has a chance to grant the Death Knight 5 runic power each time it deals damage, but there is both not an ICD, but there is not a DR either for diminishing returns. There's something going on where the more targets you have, the more runic power you will generate, but only after certain like plateaus. But who's gonna pull like 20 plus mobs in Shadowlands right now? We don't know if that's even gonna be a thing. What is the thing, of course, before I head down here to show you something else, is AMZ. That's also back. I keep forgetting we have it. In all of my testing, I think I've cast it like once, because my brain doesn't connect it. It's been gone for so long, but AMZ is back for the Death Knights as a class. Problem is that brings up is that, sure, that utility is nice and all, but where's, you know, Gorfine's Grasp for the DPS specs? Where's the same cooldown on Grip for the DPS specs? Because a lot of the time, if you're a DPS Death Knight, how many times have you been asked to go blood for a fight? Raise your hand in the comments if you're a DPS DK and have gone blood for certain fights, for like a 3 tank fight. It happens a lot. It may not only be for Grip, I get that, but a lot of the times, let's be real, it's for Grip. So I don't know if they're ever going to give it back to you. I have no idea. Other thing about target caps here is Howling Blast. If you watch when I pull these foxes here, or these Howling Blast now doesn't hit one target. A little hard. Let me AoE them a little bit far away from me. Also, that's a new thing. It doesn't hit one target anymore. Howling Blast now sort of targets everything when you cast it in a bit of a cone, and it hits everything in that cone. As they spread out around me, you'll see it goes, wah, it looks impressive. The weird thing is it's very bugged right now on the alpha, where sometimes it will just cast twice, not for damage, but for the application of your Frost Fever, where sometimes you'll cast you'll cast this and it'll see right there it goes. It's automatically pandemic to its additional 30% duration where it shouldn't be. And you cast on this guy. That's 24. So something is wrong in how it's applying now, because it's not hitting a target and radiating, it's hitting every single target. And it might be like splashing as well to them. So something is funky bunch. It looks cool though, when there's a whole bunch of mobs all like running in at you. There's a bunch of footage in the VOD. We pulled a bunch of the zombies in Necrotic Wake. And I'm just blasting Howling Blast just because it's like, blah, blah, blah. It looks cool. But it's basically also what the Unholy Death Knights have a problem with now. Outbreak is basically Howling Blast. These are essentially the same ability, just one is for Unholy and one is for Frost. But this looks so much cooler. The Unholy Outbreak is so meh. It doesn't do anything. It just goes like, on one target. It was like a little like purpley oozy cloud that hits one thing. There's no more of that like actual miasma that floats around to recast over and over again, which they should just bring back. But they need something on that one because it does nothing right now. You saw blinding sleet in there, which has been like a weird meme talent for a while, but now it has a 50% snare, I guess a slow snare after the disorient ends, which is pretty huge. Frost Scythe is 5 target capped. And the Ice Cap DR is at 4 seconds, up from 3 seconds. But that is actually problematic because eventually, at first, it'll be fine if you run Ice Cap, but eventually you might get to the point where you'll be in Pillar and you'll keep getting Frost Strike or Obliterate crits, or in AoE situations, 5 crit Frost Scythes with Killing Machine, which will give you a ton of cooldown reduction, and you'll have to recast Pillar, but you can't recast Pillar because when you do, you will totally blast out the strength bonus you have. So the cooldown reduction brings it back up when you're still in a Pillar window, meaning you have to wait for your Pillar to fall off before you recast it. And of course, again, it's still on the GCD, and so is the ERW, which makes it feel weird when you're sort of lining things up sometimes, or you're hitting 2 or 3 buttons in a row, and then you get you can cast your Ghoul off the GCD, but Pillar probably should be off the global. And then a lot of the feedback came that ERW probably can just be completely yeeted from the spec. Maybe roll it into like Obliterate or Ice Cap in some functionality. There was other discussion about, Glacial Advance is also never picked. So put Breath of Sindragosa up here and then put another talent down here that has different baseline cooldown interactions. Again, if they're all about Pillar of Frost. This is more POF. This is like bursty POF. Put another POF talent down here or something. Pull back from the archive of set bonuses or things and put something else down here potentially. Get IA out of here, because what the Horn of Winter still could use something, even though Horn of Winter for 2-hand Frost looks potentially juicy. And that's basically it. Permafrost is only auto attack still, which is just what? I guess. Sure. Let me check my notes again. I think that's everything. That's everything. Check the description box down below, of course, for the full VOD or the dungeon run. Up next will be the overall Death Knight sort of summary recap, how's it all feel video, as well as if you want the all of the guide information, all of the testing we've done so far on the channel. The guide is linked in the description box or over on my Twitch stream, !guide in chat. So if you want to support what I do here, there's many ways to do it. I've been talking too dang long. The big one, of course, if you want to check out the artists that I work with and support me through physical means, links down below in the description box for some apparel. That would be a money way, because you'd buy something for yourself and that would support me. And obviously send me a tweet or something like that if you get these, because the artists really enjoy seeing their artwork being picked up. I work with them to make things, and your support there makes me get more things with them. But that's it. Next up, DK videos and then Mage. Thank you all very much for listening and following along and hanging out. And let me know what your comments are and thoughts are down below. I'm gonna stop rambling now.